Yes. So the digital transformation workshop series, very quickly, is about how we deepen, as agile professionals, agile practitioners, how we deepen our transformation experience overall. We are going to be covering a lot of, transformation related topics that are kind of a little advanced. And today, as an example, we are going to be covering DevOps, the DevOps mindset, talking about how you can enable DevOps within your organization. So the goal is to run through this for the next 30 minutes, covering high level, discussing the details, putting color, and then maybe identifying one or two case studies with which this has been applied in some organizations. And then what are the learnings from that experience? And then we're going to close with, next steps of how you can actually take some of these ideas to socialize the DevOps mindset within your organization. As an individual, my name is Russell. For those of you who are not familiar, I'm going to throw my profile up on the screen. So this is, my profile. So for those of you who do not know me, this is my profile. So here, I'm a two-time author, transformation specialist. My job basically within organizations is to help with their agile transformation, looking at how organizations can deploy, design, define, as well as execute on their operating model. In other words, how would organizations go from, oh, we are new to agile, we are over 10,000 people within the organization. How do we structure ourselves? How do we work together? What's going to be, our value stream? How do we execute our customers? LPM coaching to change management leadership to release training engineering, as well as, being a delivery manager and then being a program coach. So basically, and these are some of the clients that I've served over time. And I'm super excited to share some of those experience and some of those learnings as, as we discuss, the whole concept of, DevOps transformation, which is where we are going in this conversation. So without further ado, I'll be sharing this slide on DevOps transformation. So when we talk about the DevOps mindset, what we are talking about at a high level is around, some of these core elements. We are talking about, DevOps transformation as a concept. We're talking about also the guiding principles. In the course of this session today, our goal is to look at DevOps transformation broadly, look at industry statistics, industry practices, and then dig into some of those guiding principles that some organizations have used to actually, implement and execute DevOps. We might not be able to, for the sake of time, look at some of the DevOps tools and, how you can actually implement this at the team level. But the subsequent transformation series that we're going to be having are going to cover some of those. And it would interest you to know that these are some of the topics that we have actually put together that we are going to be covering, as we execute, as we talk about this transformation series. So I'm going to be talking about code craftsmanship. Under code craftsmanship, you are going to hear us talk about the clean code, testing, commits, how you could actually write effective comments, as you develop your code as a developer. We're going to be talking about, BDD, which is behavioral driven development, test driven development. And then, when we start talking about platforms, and we're going to be talking about tools, the different tools that you can use from a DevOps perspective, from, for CI, CI/CD platform overviews, stats, and all of these other tools that you can use, Sonar, that are used basically within the industry for DevOps purposes. And then, down the line, we talk about security, we talk about operations, we talk about the mindset. Today's session, we're actually focusing on the mindset, which is to the far right corner here of your screen. On the mindset area, we're going to be talking about some DevOps industry practices, as well as some guiding principles. We will not have time basically to look at, empowering teams and roles and learning. but we are going to be focusing on those in subsequent transformation series. So now, when we say DevOps is, so much about mindset. It's a mindset. A lot of people, when they hear DevOps, the first thought that comes to mind is, development and operations. Yes, they are right, because DevOps in itself, the word is, DevOps, development and operation, is a portmanteau, two words coming together to form one. However, beside being, a set of practices, it's also a mindset. And the keywords that I like to emphasize here is ownership and shared business goals. So people who are actually applying DevOps within the organizations they serve are or should be focused around ownership, meaning, how do I own all of this process? What is my role in enabling this? This is not another person's function. This is my function. And then what I do, how does my ownership support the shared business goals of, my team, of the organizations with which I'm supporting? And that's exactly what we are looking at with this. So as we go basically in the subsequent slides, we are going to be emphasizing about ownership, which is your role in DevOps. You are not a DevOps engineer, but you actually can play a very significant role in driving or socializing the DevOps mindset within your organization. So I would like to look at this as the North Star. By North Star, basically, this is the target state. When we say North Star, we are referring to target state. And by target state for us, we are saying, as you, as a professional, transition within your organization, how do you know that you are nudging your leadership and, guiding your team, guiding the people within the organization towards success from a DevOps perspective? Again, DevOps is a mindset, as we've covered in a previous conversation. We also acknowledge the fact that DevOps in itself is a broad concept, as we would see, especially as we dig down in the subsequent slide. To get people there, they need to actually be in the right mindset, in the right frame of mind. And this requires them to actually have, a shared sense of trust. They need to feel empowered. In the subsequent slide, 2 slides ago, you saw where we said, how do you empower a team to actually practice DevOps? Well, there are a couple of ways, there are a couple of steps in this slide. It's all about that high level conversation. We are going to say, for you to know if you are trending in the right direction, does your team trust one another? Do they feel empowered? Are they operating or working on the principles, DevOps, which we are going to be talking about in a subsequent slide? DevOps. Are you using as much as possible, system engineering within your organization to execute? Using your in-house system engineers, as we'll see much later, we're always encouraging organizations to, as much as possible, bring in software developers, hire software and solution teams in-house, rather than focusing extensively on using outside resources, i.e. contractors. So in-house engineers, because you are trying to build the skills that they need to grow consistently, we have to develop our in-house professionals. And then one of the elements of success is around capacity-based funding. In our subsequent sessions, we're going to be talking about, what do we mean by capacity-based funding or value streams? This is a concept in itself that is A, broad, and B, it's if even organizations who have been applying Agile for a minute, they have not been very successful in applying capacity-based funding. I'm just calling it out that if you start seeing that your organization is heading in the direction of capacity-based funding, that might be a good time to actually have conversations around DevOps. And then, as much as possible, how do we start using, open architecture, which is going to be something we're going to be discussing in the subsequent slides. Open architecture to drive your architectural enablement. By that, I'm talking about, how do you use microservices, cloud services, and cloud architecture, rather than monolithic or large-scale applications. We're going to be talking about that, and then continuous integration and deployment, of course, and as much as possible, reducing touch or interaction on the code by automating your build. So these are some of the ways when you start seeing your organization from a maturity perspective, having conversations around, using more in-house engineers, getting to automate their codes and their builds, getting to have conversations around microservices and, architectures, then you should start thinking about how you can bring it all together to say, let's start talking about DevOps. So summary of what we just discussed, DevOps is a mindset, and not just a mindset. If you are to drive the DevOps mindset within your organization, some of the things that you need to watch out for to know if the pitch that you are going to be socializing within your organization will be successful is questions around trust and accountability. Does your team feel empowered to make some of these decisions? And that is, when we say empowered, we are talking about decentralized decision making. Is your organization decentralized, or does all decisions come from the top? If these, what we refer to as enablers, are put within your organization, the success, the possibility of actually socializing or selling DevOps to your organization is pretty high. And now, when we talk about DevOps, we also talk about some benefits, within DevOps. Some of the organizations, for example, like one of the clients that I serve, they have actually observed some of these metrics, some of these success, deployment frequency, for example. They are deploying 46 times more frequently than they were prior to 2017. The lead time for changes, lead time, the time with which, for example, a change occurs and a change goes through that life cycle of, interaction is 440 times faster. Lead time for changes, mean time to recover, MTTR, is another indicator as well, with which they use to track, when a system breaks down or when the system goes offline, what is the time with which that system gets back to being online, being available for public use or for public consumption. Mean time to recover, is one key element in that regard. And then the change failure rate, as it were, 5 times lower than the standard, the industry standard. So these are some, when organizations start looking at implementing DevOps, these are some of the measurable benefits that they see. And I just want to throw this in as well. This is more like just general statistics around security. As you, as a practitioner, start discussing DevOps, you're also looking at what is the threat landscape within organizations. Right now, for example, this is the statistics from 2017, 2018. Right now, it is worse off. But basically, the threat landscape is, we get somewhere around, telecommunication companies are getting about 71% more breaches than usual. They are looking at losses between organizations in general within the world, are losing somewhere between 1.4 to 1.8 billion dollars, from security breaches. And then the FBI basically is talking about over 300,000 complaints, ranging from security threats and breach to systems. So these are more like what we refer to as the threat landscape. And as a practitioner, it's key that we set systems in place that reduces these threats. One of the systems that we are going to be encouraging is, DevOps. And because of this lack of time, we will not be able to get into this activity around, DevOps and how you should be thinking about driving DevOps within your organization from a people, process, and tools perspective. But maybe in the subsequent session, we can spend some time around discussing, how you can start socializing, ways you can start socializing it first at the team level and, bottom up or top down. And then from a transformation perspective, one of the things that for the teams that we supported, this is a case study around how they have improved by implementing DevOps. Their practices, their delivery time to market has increased significantly, 44% faster than they would, as before they started implementing DevOps in 2016. Their test and then tier 2 operations are now in the same organizations and working very closely together. Much later, we're going to be discussing how tier 2 operations should be very close. Tier 2 operations should be very close to developers as much as possible. So when we say tier 2 operations, what do we mean? For us, basically, we are talking about the fact that the people who are tier 2, for example, in organizations, when a ticket comes in, it typically goes to tier 1. Those are the first sets of people that troubleshoot the issue and try to resolve the issue. However, if the issue cannot be resolved by those people on the front end, which is tier 1, typically they escalate the issues to tier 2. Now, what we are saying here is that tier 2 operations should be managed by developers. In this organization, basically, they were able to move tier 2 to developers, where the developers, they were the ones who wrote the code. They know where the code is. They know how to identify or resolve the issue way faster than somebody who did not write the code. So the bottom line is, as organizations mature in their process, mature in their DevOps and the way they improve or optimize their engineering practices, one of the recommendations is they need to move their tests and their tier 2 operations to their developers as much as possible, while maintaining tier 1 function as a centralized operation, within the organization. Tier 2 is centralized. That is where support and ticket comes in. Tier 1 is where support and ticket comes in, the first line of defense. But then the issues, when they cannot be resolved by the tier 1 folks, we move them over to the tier 2 folks, who can ensure that they can leverage their deep understanding of the product and the services to resolve the issue rather seamlessly. And then, the organization basically was also able to move from the project-based funding to capacity-based value streams. And this is a very big milestone, a significant achievement on their behalf. Now, we've been talking about DevOps in general, being a mindset. We've talked about DevOps, some of the benefits. We looked at benefits of implementing DevOps, taking into consideration the threat landscape. We've talked about how an organization who was able to implement DevOps in 2016, how when they tracked their DevOps transformation journey, they found out that they have improved their processes significantly, from moving their operations from support to development, where the developers who actually built the codes are the ones resolving the codes, and also set up microservices, that they have put in place, 700 plus microservices deployed. What that means at a high level is, rather than having a single monolithic application, they actually have microservices in place, which are applications, that actually help in case of, downtime. The entire system doesn't go down, but several elements of the system can go down, which can be resolved rather quickly, rather than the entire system going down and you have to troubleshoot to understand what the problems is. So basically, these are some of the benefits that was accrued from these organizations rolling out DevOps, and these are the benefits these are some of the wins of that organization. I'd like to stop here before we progress, into how they did it. So I was wondering if there are questions at this point. I've kind of gone a little fast looking at DevOps in general, the mindset components, organizations who have implemented it, the threat landscape. I'd like to go into how they did it, leveraging the 9 principles of DevOps. I'd like to pause here to see if we have questions. Okay, please. Oh, sure. Please go ahead. Any questions? And please feel free to leave questions on the chat as well as we go, so you do not need to keep questions till the end. Do we have any questions, or do we proceed? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. So for those of you who just joined, what we've been looking at for the past 25 minutes was, DevOps in general as a subset. We've said DevOps is a mindset. We also talked about that DevOps not just being a mindset, by executing or socializing the DevOps mindset within your organization, you actually have a high chance at actually gaining some of these benefits. We looked at some of the case studies of organizations who have successfully implemented DevOps, how they've improved their go-to-market, how they've been able to deploy, microservices that has increased or improved their mean time to recover, and how they've been able to bring their tier 2 support, which is the support when they get support from customers. The people who are responsible for taking care of tier 2 support, which is the escalated support, are the backend developers who actually build the code. And by bringing developers closer to problem resolution, we have been able to, quickly resolve those issues, and our customers have been happy, are very happy. And then we've also said organizations who have implemented DevOps, one of the things that they've seen is the general move towards, capacity-based value streams. And this, like I said, is a very big win. Large organizations who have been executing using Agile or, carrying out transformation are struggling with moving away from, because of their funding structure, they are struggling with moving away from project-based funding into capacity-based value stream funding. That's a huge shift, very difficult to implement, but organizations who are doing DevOps have realized that rather than focusing on those manual issues that actually tend to slow their time to market, because they've been able to put in that automated CI/CD pipeline, they are now focusing on other things like, how do we optimize our funding processes? How do we optimize our portfolio in a way where we can have a better intake process that is streamlined and can serve our customer in accordance with our customer journey? And so this is a big shift, and we just wanted to call it out as some of the benefits that we have seen for organizations that have been able to successfully implement DevOps. Now, that is more like what we've been talking about for the past 25 minutes. Now, moving forward, we want to look at 9 principles that these organizations who have been able to successfully implement DevOps, what they have considered, what has allowed them to be able to meet that North Star. The North Star basically is the target state with which organizations would like or aspire to get to as they are transforming themselves. So if there are no questions, we would like to, go straight into those. I'd like to pause for a minute to see if there are questions. Okay, for those of you who just joined, I would like to just throw in one word. The idea here is, if you are a transformation professional, a developer, a director, a manager, selling DevOps within your organization can be a very tricky endeavor. Many organizations would like you to be able to, they want to run in a DevOps analysis. They want to see DevOps would work within the organization because it is expensive to be able to do that, let alone the time that's going to be spent to run those analyses, to analyze the system, and to see their DevOps readiness. The question now is, if you want to start having those kinds of conversations with your team and start nudging your organization in the right direction, what should you be thinking about? What are the things or the signals that you have to watch out for to be sure that your organization is ready? And that is where we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes. Now, the conversation now is around, what are those principles, those guiding principles that should guide you should your organization start going on that path? So here, these are some of the guiding principles. At the end of this exercise or this session, we should be able to look at some of the guiding principles for DevOps transformation. You should be able to list some of those guiding principles. You should be able to talk about how those principles basically can be used to steer the strategy of your organization when you are looking at making this transformation. And then, most importantly, how do you bring those principles alive? How do you integrate them, first of all, at the team level, then at the program level within organizations, and then probably at the solution level, and then subsequently at the portfolio level? This mindset, this DevOps mindset of collective ownership, this DevOps mindset of accountability, how can you socialize that? How can you scale that? Whether you are a scrum master within your organization, a product manager, a developer, a dev lead, a director of delivery, whatever your role is, you have a role, or you can play a very important role in steering the strategy of your organization towards automation, using DevOps. the DevOps and its principles. So the 9 principles, ladies and gentlemen, it's this: culture, people and culture, connecting the business, minimum viable products is one of the principles, utilizing scaled agile, and open flexible architecture that discusses how we deploy way faster, how we could excel in engineering practices and some of the built-in quality and security, how you can implement that. And then, of course, the CI/CD pipeline, which is very popular. When people think about DevOps, the first thought that comes to mind is the CI/CD pipeline. We're going to be covering that as well as a principle. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can actually play, what the role you can play basically in increasing, the ownership around DevOps within your organization. So the first principle here, the first principle here is culture, people, and culture. As much as possible, as a leader within your organization, we always encourage leaders to look at how do they train their people, because culture, one of the principles, if you are a safe professional, let's say an SPC, or you are executing or implementing safe within your organization, one of the things you are going to hear is the karma approach to DevOps. Karma, with the first word being culture. So culture is a huge component, and that's the place that we are going to start. For you need to focus on investing in your people, train them to be experts. And one of the ways with which you should be able to do that is to look at, first of all, investing in building that expertise of DevOps within your organization. Build that technical capability. Ensure that your engineers have what we refer to as E-shaped competence, meaning they have deep experience. As much as, again, this is not cheap. It takes time, but it's an investment that pays a long dividend. In most organizations, they are very scared of investing in their engineering team. Why? Because of the high attrition rates. You spend that time developing people, and then people just move from your organization into the next. One of the things that has happened many times. But then one of my famous quotes I got from a book by the CEO of Disney. He said, if you do not invest in your people because you are afraid that they are going to leave your organization and go somewhere else, you are losing out an opportunity to build a talented workforce, a talented team. Make that investment, make your organization conducive. People would stay if they want to stay. But even if they choose to leave, because maybe for some personal reasons, you have done your best basically in improving the skill set of that particular individual, something that will stay with that person for life. So the goal here is invest in your people's expertise, and that would pay a huge dividend in form of they being able to get the business value very quickly because they are technically proficient. They know what to do. They know how to do it. They know when to do it. Bearing in mind, for example, change management, one of the limitations with which that prevents people from doing something is because they lack the technical skills to get it done. So if you want to get on your DevOps journey, you have to be ready to encourage your leadership, to look at training, building that skill set, and then empowering the team as much as possible. When the teams feel empowered, they are going to make those decisions that would improve the general outcome of the organization because they are empowered to do so. In Toyota, for example, they call it the red flag mechanism. And one of the authors, that Jim Collins wrote a book titled Good to Great, and Good to Great. And in the book, he talked about the red flag mechanism. What that means is, imagine you're in a manufacturing plant and you see in production defects. If you see defects in production, are you empowered to stop the line, why the production should be moving? Imagine a conveyor belt. Are you empowered to stop the line, raise your hand, and indicate that, hey, there's a defect here, fix it, and put the line back on? Or do you have to go up the chain, seek approvals from your manager's manager and your manager's manager's manager before you can be able to make that decision that you see is a problem? If your organization is structured in a way where to get the simplest thing done, people need to get multiple layered approval rather than actually just doing it, then there's a problem. So here, when Jim Collins in his book, he was talking about how do we empower our people to be able to make those decisions that will drive, as it were, because they are the ones on the ground. They are the ones closest to the problem. They should make those decisions. They should be empowered to make those decisions at the team level. And then, as much as possible, if you want to drive your DevOps journey, focus on building, full stack teams where people can actually have a good understanding because they have cross-functional skill sets. They can have a good understanding of the front-end technologies, back-end technologies, middlewares, and be able to have that healthy conversation and be able to make, holistic, get into holistic conversations around quality, around development, even around estimation. As an example, if your developers are well trained and they have E-shaped competence, meaning they are technically proficient, they can get into the conversation, sizing conversations. Let's say you are there at the team level. You can get into sizing conversations and talk about the entire solution. Talk about it. Let's say, for example, they take a user story or a feature and they're talking about it because they understand the front end and the back end impact, including databases. They can talk holistically about the level of effort that is required to execute a particular task without being blindsided by their limitation, aka being front-end engineers or being back-end engineers. So full stack cross-functionality, cross-functional skills is highly recommended. So being part of your DevOps transformation, we need to look at really investing in building that cross-functional skill set within our organization. And then trust is key. As much as possible, when people trust one another, it actually improves not only the ambience of working together, but also the quality of their delivery. So to get on your DevOps journey, you need to focus on building your people and investing in your culture, creating that culture of trust and accountability. Another way with which you can help your DevOps journey to be successful is to connect to the business. In most organizations, you hear things like IT and business. There's this so much huge chasm, between business and IT. And the question is, how can you bring this connection between the business and the teams who are doing the work? How can you bring them together? And why is this important? When you bring the business and IT, you put them on the same table, you would see that you are going to have better outcomes, joint accountability. The business will not just come in and make prioritization decisions, prioritize and say, oh, okay, throw it over the fence and expect IT to take it off. No, we are all in this together. We are all driving the outcome that we want to see to improve the value for the customer. We would be able to, the business and IT work together, they'll be able to help with pushing the right decisions on the features. Well, we are also familiar with the Pareto principle, whereby 80% of the features that are being developed today by most teams are not being used by the customer. The customer actually uses only 20% of the features. And this happens because of this distance, between the business and IT. The business wants something, they communicate it through very limited proxies like product owners. And then these proxies have to relay that information back to the team. A lot is lost in translation. And so when the developers are building, they are building what they thought the business is asking for, whereas that is very far from reality. The people who suffer from all of this are the customers. And to prevent that, we have to bring the developers and the business, bring them to the table, get them to work together, get them to be involved. And in doing this, they can improve the experience for the customer overall. Another thing that you need to watch out for, especially as you implement your DevOps journey and your transformation journey, is the MVPs. Your MVPs, focus on MVPs. Why MVPs? MVPs are minimum viable products. The idea behind the MVPs is that you are building quality. You are building a product and getting feedback, quick feedback. Rather than building a huge solution, build a small piece of the solution end to end and give the customer so that you can know if that is what the customer is looking for. DevOps can be a very useful process when you start shifting people to try small pieces of solution, get this to the customer and get feedback, you'll be able to, what's going to happen is your production risk is going to be lower because you are going in that MVP route. Your feedback is going to be higher because you are learning from executing or implementing this small functionality and using that learning to improve your process, boost morale for your team, and also get an opportunity to be able to get more revenues. Why? Because you can show your organization that, hey, this is an MVP. Imagine what would happen if we deploy more resources to this. You can have that conversation because you have something to show. So how do you do this practically? A solution should take 6 months to build. Yes, it needs 6 months to build, but is there a way that you can vertically slice that solution in a way where you can show your stakeholders a small version of it so that they can imagine what the full solution would look like? Is there a way that they can test the functionality that you are building in a way where they can give you feedback? Is there a way they can use test a small piece of what you are envisioning as a larger solution so that they can fall in love with it? In that way, when you talk about funding, when you talk about they bringing more funds, it's easy to have those kinds of conversations. So to get your organization in the direction of DevOps thinking, remember DevOps is a mindset. You need to actually start shifting your leadership and shifting your team around MVPs. Get them to think small. Start small, think small, think big, start small. That is the principle. Think big, start small. And then, as much as possible, use frameworks like Scaled Agile or Agile to improve, your processes. So Scaled Agile and Agile, what they do basically best is to drive that continuous flow of value using iterations, using sprint-based work. It's to actually increase the goal of Scaled Agile is to actually increase using small teams, and a methodology that is repeatable to drive value and outcome. When you use Scaled Agile basically as a principle, what that does is it allows you as an organization to start heading in the direction of DevOps. Why? DevOps is a mindset, just as, Scrum is a mindset. You are trying to get people to think about small increments. In the previous principle, we talked about MVPs, where you are building, you are thinking big, but starting small. In the agile as well, even the Scaled Agile, you are talking about how do you use those methodologies and small teams working together to deliver value very quickly to the customer. It is this pivot in thinking that is crucial in getting your DevOps transformation to be more successful. So we've talked about 4 principles so far. 1, you have to invest in your people and your culture. Investing in your people pays the highest dividend because you are building their cross-functionality, you are building their full stack experience so that they will be able to use that technical competence to be able to better build solutions that meet your specific customer needs. We talked about implementing, hold on one second. We talked about connecting to the business. We said as much as possible, bring your people and the business to work together. By bringing the business and your teams to work together, it improves the outcome generally for the customer. We talked about the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle says 80% of the features that are being built are not being used by customers. Rather, the customer uses about 20% of those features. Think about BlackBerry and the over 20 buttons on BlackBerry devices versus the no button on Apple devices. Think about it. So the question now is, how do we, as much as possible, bring the business closer to the teams in a way where the teams can know exactly what the business is asking and they can both own the outcome of the delivery. And then in principle 3, talked about MVPs. Think big and start small. Get your teams to think big generally in respect to where they want to go, but they need to start small and then so that they can get buy-in from their stakeholders and use that buy-in basically to increase, support for the product, to get, additional funding, and also to improve the feedback, so that they can pivot the solution where necessary to meet the specific needs of the customer. And now we are talking about the 4th principle around leveraging principles like Scaled Agile and Agile to improve your speed to market. Remember, the principle behind Agile is speed to value. As much as possible, teams are working in iterations, teams are working in sprints, building solutions very quickly, running at the end of the sprint, demos, retrospectives, a continuous feedback loop to improve the outcome for the customer. So as much as possible on your DevOps journey, we encourage you to, start looking at agile frameworks and or scaled agile if necessary. If your organization has lots of teams, look at the scaled agile framework as one of those frameworks that can help your teams deliver and embrace continuous improvement. And then open and flexible architecture is key as well. As much as possible, try looking at decoupled architecture. Here, we're talking about a situation where when you are using open architecture and microservices, what you are doing basically is, rather than building a monolithic solution that is going to be very huge and clunky and very difficult to fix, you are using a very modular approach to development. In other words, if something fails in the solution you are building, it's only going to be a small component that can be fixed without impacting the larger solution. So as much as possible as on your DevOps journey, we encourage you to consider that open and flexible architecture. It is easier to deploy, it reduces dependency as much as possible, and Scrum teams love it. Why? Because they can actually work within that microservice solution and be very successful. Much later in our subsequent transformation series, we might go deep into microservices and how organizations have been able to deploy microservices to improve, their ability to be much more competitive, how Scrum teams actually work within those microservices environments, how solution architects develop solution intent, looking at impacted applications, these microservice architecture. We might look at some of these later in subsequent transformation series. But then the fifth principle here is around embracing the mindset of open and flexible architecture. So there are a couple of things we've talked about. On your DevOps transformation journey, consider investing in your people. That's number one principle. That's going to help you. Number two, try to connect your business and your team. Connect your people and your business together. IT and business should not be separate. As much as possible, bring them together because they are in service of the customer. The customer is the boss. If you do not work together, the only people that gain is the competition. Number three, try looking at MVPs. Rather than building very big monolithic solutions, build MVPs, minimum viable product. Test your ideas out, get feedbacks, and iterate from there. Number four, consider using frameworks like Scrum, like Agile. By doing that, basically, you shift away from the project mindset into a much more agile, nimble, and flexible mindset. And then number five, consider open and flexible architecture. It's important because it introduces microservices, cloud solutions that would improve the ability for your solution to be decentralized. Anything happens, basically only parts of your solution is going to be impacted and your entire system does not go down. We're almost done. Remember, we have 9 principles. We're already on the 6th principle. The 6th principle is, as much as possible, improve your engineering practices. It is key. To be successful, you need to shift left, in your code, the way you develop your code. Look at shifting left. By shifting left, it means we're bringing quality to the left. In our delivery cycle, get your developers to be involved. They need to know unit testing. They need to understand it. They need to own that unit testing process. Get your engineering teams to be as close to tier 2 support in delivery as much as possible. In other words, if customers are raising concerns and the customer raises concern in tier 1, they've gotten tier 1 support, but the issue is not resolved, get your delivery team to be able to have that intake process, maybe through Kanban, your Kanban system, an intake process where those technical issues can come in, but because the code is open, the developer knows where that code is, basically on either GitLab or GitHub or Bitbucket in any of their code repository. They know where to go to resolve that issue very timely so that the customer is going to be happy. So when you invest in your people and you develop your engineering capabilities, you improve the outcome that you get from this entire process. Your quality of your code is going to be improved. Your security is going to be improved significantly. Remember, in a couple of slides when we started, way back, we talked about the security landscape. The security landscape is pretty scary. Hundreds of thousands, 300,000 security threats, to organizations way back in 2017. Right now, it should be somewhere around 500,000 security threats, that are reported to the FBI every year. That's to tell you how important, security is. The key question is to be able to start transitioning your organization, to DevOps. You need to start getting people aware of the security component, but to get there, you need to also enable your teams, invest in your engineering, and then emphasize, engineering best practices that would help your developers, not only clean their code, improve the quality of their code, but secure their codes even better. And then the seventh principle is around built-in quality and security. We've been talking about security. We said security is very crucial, but then to get there, you need your developers to be trained. To get there, you need to reduce the touch points in your code. In other words, get your hands off your code as much as you can by introducing automation as much as you can. If you introduce automation, basically it increases your security significantly because the human element, is reduced as much as possible. You are pushing, for example, your builds, you are automating your builds deployments. In most organizations, for example, builds and, preparing the builds and pushing those builds into production can take hours. In some cases, I've seen engineers working through the weekends, to be able to compile their builds and push those builds into prod. So how do you prevent that burnout for your team? Introduce test automation, where you introduce those tools that can help your developers. It's an investment. It's not cheap, but it's an investment that pays huge dividends. And then get your teams to start carrying out best practices, engineering best practices like, TDD, test-driven development, which can get them to test early. In our subsequent sessions, we're going to be talking about how, ATDD, and TDD can be used to improve the quality of your code in general. And then continuous, integration and deployment. This is the heart and, the heart of DevOps. As much as possible, setting up that infrastructure and tools to enable that continuous deployment and as you go, continuous integration and continuous deployment as you go. By doing this, you are improving, as it were, your opportunity for quality, building quality in. You are avoiding or reducing security where necessary. You are running those security tests as you go, as you execute. And your teams, basically, the workload of having to push manually push is going to be completely eliminated. Finally, ownership is key. You build it, you own it. Get your team to be highly involved in the development. Reduce the hands-off where necessary. And by hands-off, we are saying, let me give you a specific example. When your delivery team should own tier 2 production support activities. That's what we've been talking about previously. When they own those kinds of activities, they can, because they are closest to the code, because they wrote the code, they'll be in better position to actually drive the resolution of that code rather quickly. By doing that, they improve the relationship with the customer, they make the customer happy, and they improve the general outcome overall. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how you actually start getting your organization to pivot in a direction of DevOps. So putting it all together, so bringing it together, when we say DevOps transformation is a journey in itself. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires teams and people to work collaboratively. It also needs the support of leadership. If you want to help your organization on their journey to DevOps, you need to start to DevOps transformation. You need to start thinking about investing in your people. You need to invest in technology as well. The skill set of your people is crucial. You also need to consider investing in automation as much as possible. The CI/CD pipeline within your organization, you have to nudge your teams to try building minimum viable products, MVPs. You have to work with your people basically to improve their engineering practices. Where possible, train, keep training, empower them with the skills, get them to feel safe and secure where they can have that red flag mechanism to be able to shut down, production if they see that whatever is there, for example, at the code level is going to be impacting production. They should be empowered to make those decisions. By putting all of this in place, you improve the high likelihood that your organization would, be much more DevOps friendly and be able to enjoy some of the benefits that comes with implementing DevOps, namely, being like 400 times faster, to the market, reducing defects within your code and improving security. And I would like to add the happiness of your teams. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of today's session. And just in case you just joined, it's about improving, or socializing the DevOps mindset within your organization. I don't know if you have any questions for me. Okay, so we have, please continue.
Are you providing the PowerPoint to us as well so we can review it?
Sure, okay. I will. I would share the PowerPoint basically on the general link over on Meetup, so that people can have it.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, and then, sorry, what's your name? So I can be sure you get. I'm sorry?
Jonay. Okay,
beautiful.
Thank you.
And then one other thing, we are trying to do this every week where we take a topic, a technical topic, because the E-shape network is about building technical. The E-shape network is about building technical competence. This is our first, training first training for us. We're going to be taking other advanced topics as well, talking about E-shape, how you can take some of these ideas, take them home, take them to work the next day and use them as much as you can. We're going to be talking about scaled agile. We're going to be talking about transformation. We're going to be talking about operating models. We're going to be talking about value streams. We're going to be talking about a lot of technical components. But then the point is, at some point, it's going to be not just a lecture, but a conversation where we debate and talk about how are you doing it in your organization? What are the challenges that you have seen? And let's have a conversation around that. We'll get there, but for now, we'll just be pushing it in the form of a lecture, but subsequently we would love to have a conversation. Thank you very much, team. If you have questions, please, if you joined us over on Meetup, please drop questions. We'll be glad to have you again in the next session that we're having next week. We're going to share the topic we're going to be talking about, and we'll be looking forward to your input and your support. We want to be respectful of your time. It's 8 p.m. Central. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coach.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Coach.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.